Hi, I'm Erica Hoyt, and I am going to discuss backward design. After this presentation, you will be able to apply the steps of backward design, creating your 4 student-centered learning objectives in your teaching project plan for the end of the semester. So we'll open with a question. You are a brand new nursing faculty. You're asked to give the 2-hour infection control class to the first semester nursing students. What is your strategy to create that teaching plan? First, maybe you want to read the chapter in the textbook, design and then deliver the content, and then write the exam questions. Well, this sounds very logical. Hopefully, you will be gifted, whoever you're replacing, you'll be gifted their PowerPoint presentations. You'll have all of their teaching plans. They'll even give you the exam questions that they have used throughout the years. So as a brand new faculty, they're going to gift you that, and you are going to take it and teach from it. That is very typical and a very common practice. Another common practice is to review the book's objectives. You look at that infection control chapter, design and deliver the teaching content. Then you write the exams for the content areas that the students had difficulty with. So maybe you know the beginning chapter, it always has learning objectives. So at least you're starting with the learning objectives. And then you're designing and delivering the content. As you're delivering it, there's some areas of the content students struggle with. So you spend some extra time on that, maybe come up with some other activities and decide, I really want to make sure that's on the exam so that they have learned it. And then another strategy that my computer doesn't want to, oh, there you go. Third strategy is to review the exam questions, then design and deliver your teaching content to ensure that you have reviewed the content that's going to be tested, and then you write the student learning objectives at the end just to kind of help organize your teaching plan and make sure you covered everything. So this is also logical. Being on the first day on the job, you don't want your students to fail their first exam. So you want to make sure you have covered that content that is going to be on the exam. And then you design and deliver the teaching content, making sure all of those exam questions are covered. You might, at the end, write the student learning objectives and organize your plan. Again, makes sense. The last strategy is to determine what the nurse needs to do related to infection control. Create methods for the student to demonstrate what they need to do, and then design the learning activities. So, examples A through C, those are based on an input-based curriculum, not a backward design curriculum. Examples A through C focused on teaching the content. It is very traditional, familiar, common. When you adopt a textbook, often the publication company will give you the PowerPoint presentation, suggested activities. They'll give you exam questions. They give you the whole thing. It would be horrible to think that any school would just take that and use that as their curriculum. But guess what? Sometimes that happens. And that has been very traditionally done over years. Instead, we need to have the backward design to our curriculum. When we focus on the teaching content and what the contents of the textbook. We'll have a unit exam, the learners memorize it, and then it's forgotten. We're focusing more on that textbook, the lessons in there, activities that they suggest. We're focusing on teaching, not learning. That is the big difference. There are 3 stages of backward design. The very first is to identify the results. What do you want your student to do? We use, what is a practice-ready nurse look like? What can we see a practice-ready nurse to do? Then we're going to select our evaluation method. How are we going to be able to measure objectively that our student has met that objective? Do they have the knowledge, skills, and attitudes of a practice-ready nurse? So we align those objectives and the evaluation methods, and then we create our learning activities. So I'll use an example of infection control to take you through this process. A little background, infection control is the first unit of instruction for our first semester BSN pre-licensure students, the first day of school. It is taught in our Essentials of Nursing course in the classroom, and then it is reinforced, the psychomotor skills are reinforced in the lab. And then they have a clinical where they put everything together and are actually working with the patients. So first, identifying the desired results. What can the nurse do? So what are the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that our nurse needs to be able to demonstrate surrounding infection control? We may want to look at what course outcomes does the student need to meet? What program outcomes does the student need to meet? And then as the whole nation is moving towards competency-based education, we have specific competencies that demonstrate what the nurse can do when they are proficient with that competency. So what is it that we're looking for? And then we have our first semester student may look a little different in what we expect from our graduate student who is studying epidemiology. So what are our desired results? We also may have input from their stakeholders. Certainly we're going to look at the NCLEX blueprint to make sure that we are covering content that is tested. What do our stakeholders want? I would hope nobody has students that get into the clinical setting and they don't know how to wash their hands, but what do our stakeholders want? And actually on this one, our stakeholder wants our students to be checked off and competent, being able to demonstrate that competency with hand hygiene before going to clinical. So because this is given in the lesson of writing your behavioral objectives, I thought I'd give you an example of what I did. So at the end of the lesson, the student will correctly explain the chain of infection, evaluate infection prevention strategies within a chain of infection, demonstrate proper hand washing technique, integrate hand hygiene consistently within care settings. So because this is in our objective module, we have 2 ways of looking at the different components for our objectives. One is the SMART objective, specific. We're looking for those action verbs, which I have bolded. The M in SMART is measurable. I have in italics how I'm measuring it. Are they going to correctly explain? Are they going to correctly come up with strategies, prevention strategies? are they going to properly demonstrate hand washing? And then are they going to consistently integrate hand hygiene at all the appropriate times within the clinical setting? Achievable. Can they do these within the time? We only have 1 week, one class period to teach this. Is this achievable? Is the level of my student, can they do this? Yes, I feel they can. Resources, and one of the resources may be time. Do we have enough time to teach this? Do we have somebody competent that can teach this? If we're doing hand hygiene, do we have running water and soap? If not, what are we going to do? And then time is the last part of the SMART objective. And my time, I put at the top at the end of the lesson. So I have another way of doing it would be the ABCD method. So audience, I have my audience, I've specifically put at the very top, the student will. The behavior, again, are my action verbs. The condition, I put that at the end of the lesson, the end of the module, or by the end of the unit. And then the degree, that is what's in italics, how I am measuring it. How good do they need to do this? Do they need to do it sort of correctly? Do they need to complete hand hygiene most of the time when it's appropriate? I also, since we're in the module of learning behavioral objectives, I put some of the domain after each one, and then the specific level. So the explain is in the understanding level of the chain of infection. Explain is in the understanding level of the cognitive domain. Evaluate, well, that makes sense. It's in the evaluating level. Just notice I did use the Orman textbook, the evaluation. We'll use that in our evaluation course. Vastable currently has the incorrect levels and incorrect information on cognitive and psychomotor domain verbs. Second, I need to determine acceptable evidence. So how am I going to know these students achieved the desired results? What documents are evidence that they have met the objectives? How is the information applied in a competent clinical judgment? I might have observations, skills checklists, clinical evaluation tools, self-assessments, quizzes. I need to align them. So for explaining the chain of infection, I'm going to have a summative multiple choice exam. That'll be at the end of the unit. Evaluate infection prevention strategies within the chain of infection. We have a really fun, formative, in-classroom case study and a worksheet that we fill out that we look at different infectious agents and try to look at the different parts of the chain of command. Where can we chain of command? We're going to evaluate infection prevention strategies within the chain of infection by using formative case studies. We have a worksheet that we use in class. We have various infectious agents, and students identify each component of the chain of infection and what their strategy would be to make sure that infectious agent doesn't continue the chain of infection. In the lab, we're going to demonstrate proper hand washing technique, and we use a skills validation form that is required for one of our clinical partners. So day one, they have completed it. And then in our clinical setting, we're going to use an evaluation tool to observe the integration of hand hygiene consistently. Are they students consistently completing hand hygiene at all of the appropriate times? And then the fun part, the learning activities. So after we know what we're looking for with our objectives, how we're going to measure it, then we're going to go to the third stage and figure out what is the knowledge, skills, attitudes that are going to be needed to achieve the results. What are the best activities and strategies for teaching that's going to give us those results? What materials and resources do we have available to help us with those results? So if you would like further information, we have 2 resources. The Klein article was presented to you in the module, and then the book that describes backward design by Wiggins and McTee. It is available in the UCF library online, and it explains it in a lot more depth. But I hope this is a summary to get you started on thinking about what are you going to do for your 2-hour teaching plan.